Today we're going to be reviewing Stephen King's book of short stories called Skeleton Crew. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, published by Simon & Schuster Saga Press, and this is my series of video reviews where I am reviewing every Stephen King novel in publication order. So here we go. We're at Skeleton Crew right now. You will know that it's a book of short stories that also included the short novella The Mist, which is over here, right there, I believe. I reviewed that in my previous review. I thought it was a strong enough story that it should garner its own review. So if you want to see my review of The Mist, I will provide a link to that review at the end of this video. But let's get to Skeleton Crew. Skeleton Crew, book of short stories by Stephen King, like I already said. The novella The Mist opens up this book in grand fashion. It's a great novella, The Mist. And then from there, the short stories kind of go downhill. I'm just not a short story fan, so most of my reviews for Stephen King's short story collections are going to be brief and probably slightly on the more negative side. No fault of Stephen King. He's a wonderful writer. His short stories are fantastic. I am just not a short fiction fan. So let's get to some of the more notable stories. The forgettable ones I'm just not going to mention. The more notable stories. Let's start with the monkey. It's on the cover. The monkey with the symbols. Cling, the little toy monkey, cling, 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 grinning. Ding, ding, ding. All night long, just freaking little kids out. It's an iconic Stephen King image. The monkey grinning with the symbols, just sitting in the corner of the kid's bedroom. Cling, cling, cling. It's actually a pretty good story, you know. Stephen King got the idea for the story as he was walking through New York City and saw some guy on the street selling these creepy, just rows and rows and rows of these creepy little monkeys with symbols. And it just gave him the idea for the short story. And, you know, this little monkey's got some little supernatural powers kind of about it that people around the monkey start turning up dead. That's basically the plot. It's a short story. You know, kind of cool. One of the stories that I really did quite like in this book was called The Raft, which was about 5 college students who go out onto a lake in Pennsylvania on a little wooden raft. And they go out into the lake and they notice there's a real dark patch of water in the lake. And they can't escape the dark patch of water, and the dark patch of water just starts to kill the college students one by one. That's the plot of the story. That's the whole thing. But it was interesting. I liked the characters. I liked kind of the interplay between the characters. Another. Oh, this one's probably my favorite story in the book, and it's called Survivor Type. And Stephen King, he wrote the story. In conjunction with writing the story, he asked one of his doctor friends, "Hey, how long could a person last if they were stuck on a deserted island and the only thing they had to eat was their own body? And what if they just started cutting little pieces of their own body off and eating it to sustain themselves? How long could they last?" And that's the way Stephen King's mind works, right? It's just weird shit coming out all the time. And the doctor was like, well, they'd probably die of shock before they actually carved themselves up enough to actually die of blood loss or lack of body to sustain themselves. But Stephen King was writing this story about a drug runner who crashed his plane off. He had a plane full of cocaine. He crashed it near a deserted island. Then he's stuck on a deserted island, kind of like Tom Hanks in Castaway. And worse things get worse. There's no food, and so he's starting to look at his own fingers and his own legs and feet and dreaming of roast beef sandwiches and things like that. And he starts just whittling away at his own flesh and eating himself and cooking himself and eating himself, and until he becomes obsessed with it. It's like he's sawing through his own bones, drooling over the fact that he's going to be eating his own foot. Just a weird story. Kind of creepy, kind of gory, but the typical Stephen King sort of madness. I liked that one. That one was quite good. Here There Be Tigers. It was a little short story about a little kid that thinks that there's a tiger in his elementary school bathroom that's eating everybody that goes into the bathroom. Kind of clever. Cain Rose Up. A story about a kid that gets a sniper rifle and shoots up people from a sniper from the top of a building. Sort of inappropriate for this day and age with all the shootings that we get in schools. Another reason why Stephen King did not... he wrote the novel Rage, which was about a similar themed thing, and it's one of the novels he wished he'd never written, and one of the novels that I will not review on this YouTube channel, just out of respect for Stephen King, wishing he'd never written the book in the first place. But that's a kind of a sniper shoot 'em up thing where, it's a lone gunman kind of a thing. I didn't really like it, but it's worth noting, along with the novel Rage that he wrote. Word Processor of the Gods. That's a pretty good one. That's where a guy he's a novelist and he gets a word processor and he realizes that the stuff that he types into the word processor actually affects the world around him. There's like some sort of phenomena that he types in, hey, I don't like this guy. And then the next thing you know, that guy doesn't exist and everything about him doesn't exist. And he starts deleting people out of his life that he doesn't like through the word processor. Kind of a clever story. That's a handful of stories that caught my attention. The rest, there's probably about 12 to 15 more that just pretty much put me to sleep. I found my eyes glazing over as I listened to them. And like I said, I also listen to these, as I read along with the book, I'm listening to the audible.com version. This one had a lot of narrators. It had a different narrator for each story, so I won't get into all of the narrators, but they all did a good job. My favorite was probably Matthew Broderick on The Monkey. It's kind of nice to hear a familiar voice narrating a story. He did a good job with The Monkey. I like that. But the thing is I found my eyes just glazing over. I was kind of like bored with a lot of the stories. But then again, it's no fault of Stephen King's. I'm bored with just short stories in general. And literally his short stories are the only ones I ever read. And I only find, a handful in each collection worthy of note, and the rest, it's just not for me. Short fiction's not for me. I've never written a short story in my life. Every idea I have for a novel is an enormous, big, huge epic, like The Forgetting Moon, which is 300,000 words, and every novel I've ever written is around that 300,000 word mark. And to put that in perspective for you, that's about the size of Stephen King's Under the Dome or George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones. I write big epic novels like The Stand and It and stuff like that. Wheel of Time. Anyway, enough about me. The Skeleton Crew, not quite as good in my opinion as his first collection, Night Shift. I did enjoy a lot more of the stories in Night Shift than I enjoyed in the Skeleton Crew. I think the Skeleton Crew is propped up mainly by the novella The Mist that's at the beginning of it. I think that's its high point. And like I said, I reviewed that in a separate review. You can look at that later if you would like, along with all of my other Stephen King reviews. But I'm going to give this kind of a middle of the road rating, a 6.5 out of 10. I do 1 through 10 on everything. Most Stephen King stuff is a lot higher than that. His short story collections tend to be on the low side. 6.5 out of 10. Skeleton Crew. If you want to read some short stories by Stephen King, he's got a lot of them and he's got a lot of collections. Skeleton Crew is one of those collections.